I took what I took, and it gets declassified. And by the way, they become automatically declassified when I took them. Everything was declassified because I had the right to declassify.
But Mark Meadows, the man who served by Donald Trump's side as his chief of staff, has told investigators he was aware of no such broad declassification order.
We have not heard much from Trump's former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, for quite some time now. And there have been all these rumors percolating about how he might be cooperating with the special counsel, Jack Smith, in the two specific DOJ investigations and charges that Trump is now facing. One having to do with the classified documents case, the other having to do with his attempts to overturn the 2020 presidential election. Now we're hearing reports that Mark Meadows has in fact been speaking to Smith about the classified documents and whether Trump actually declassified them ahead of time, which was one of the defenses that Trump has been floating around ever since these charges came up. And what Meadows is saying clearly contradicts what Trump is using as part of his defense, at least publicly. So according to this new report, Meadows has told special counsel Jack Smith's investigators that he could not recall Trump ever ordering or even discussing declassifying broad sets of classified materials before leaving the White House, nor was he aware of any standing order from Trump authorizing the automatic declassification of materials taken out of the Oval Office. In fact, Meadows even told investigators that he had heard the term standing order used during his time at the White House, but it was never used in the context of declassifying these classified documents. Meadows also told investigators that he did not witness Trump himself packing boxes and was unaware that Trump had taken any government records, including classified documents. And Meadows recalled to investigators only one instance in his time serving as Trump's chief of staff, where he claimed to see Trump declassifying documents involving a binder with materials from the FBI's Crossfire hurricane investigation into Trump's 2016 campaign's ties with Russia, according to multiple sources familiar with the matter. And that order in the final days of Trump's time in the White House was the subject of dispute. However, as the Justice Department has resisted publicly releasing, they've resisted publicly releasing those documents at issue. But there are other classified documents that we know about, including one that Trump was apparently talking about and waving around as he was in a closed door meeting with the ghostwriter for Mark Meadows' book, along with the publicist for Mark Meadows. We'll get to that in just a moment, but Cenk, I want you to jump in.
Yeah, so the number one question here is Mark Meadows a witness for the prosecution in the federal cases that Jack Smith is bringing? Both the documents case and maybe even more importantly, the January 6th case. Because in the documents case, Meadows would have helpful information like this, which is definitely helpful. We'll get to how helpful it is in 1 second. But in the January 6th case, he would have a ton of information as a chief of staff to the president on whether they attempted to do fake electors and in essence, a coup against America. And so that is why whether he's cooperating with the prosecutors is enormously important. And unfortunately, even with this story, we're left a little unclear as to whether he is or he isn't. So we'll come back to that too. But in terms of this particular piece of evidence, it's damning, of course. But look, you don't need this. It's just helpful for the jury to understand. But everyone on planet Earth knows there is no such thing as declassifying documents by thinking about it, or by taking it out of a room, or laserizing them, or dreaming about them. These are not things. There are actually laws in this country, and there is no law that says a president can go, I declassify you. So this is just Mark Meadows saying, yeah, of course, there's no such law. And of course, he never actually, even if there was a law like that, he never actually did any of that. And to me, the most important one was the one you said at the end there, Anna, because they declassified a document together. So there's no question that there was a regular process for declassifying a document, and Trump did not use that process for any of these documents.
Now, after it was clear that the feds were reaching out to Donald Trump in order to get those documents back, remember, Trump had ample opportunities to just return the classified documents. He didn't have to face a criminal trial as a result of what he did had he just complied and handed over the documents. He refused to do so. But according to what Mark Meadows has told prosecutors in this case, he had even offered to sift through those documents along with Donald Trump in order to do right by the federal government and return those documents. Let's take a look at what he said specifically according to the reports.
Meadows told investigators that he had no idea Trump had brought classified documents and other official records with him to Mar-a-Lago, and that when the documents were first requested by the National Archives, he offered to help Trump go through the boxes he had taken from the White House to find and return official records. Meadows, according to sources, said the president did not accept his offer.
The president did not accept his offer. So Cenk, just going back to your question about whether Meadows is cooperating with the investigators. Look, we don't know the extent to which he's cooperating with investigators. We do know that he is willing to tell investigators things that clearly contradict Trump's narrative. And that goes further than what we've experienced from other Trump lackeys, right? Other Trump lackeys will ignore subpoenas and like refuse to cooperate, period. Now, the context is a little different. Usually it's in the case of like a Trump impeachment, but nonetheless, the fact that he is answering questions from Smith and showing a willingness to contradict Trump's narrative, I think says something about how willing he is to basically cooperate. I don't know to the extent to which he's cooperated already though.
Yeah, and so I think all that is absolutely correct. But let me add important clarity to this too, which is that in the documents case, there's no need for Mark Meadows to get immunity. It doesn't appear that he did anything wrong. He had no idea that Trump was taking the archives. And when he found out that he took the documents, he offered to help. The fact that Trump turned down his offer is also pretty telling, because that's his chief of staff. If anybody would have enough security clearance to look through those documents and get the proper ones back to the archives, it would be Mark Meadows. There aren't a lot of people that have enough security clearance to do that, and he didn't pick anyone else either. In other words, Trump notified not only by the government, but also by his own advisors saying, no, Mr. President, you have these documents you definitely should not have. So let me come help you bring them back. And he's like, no, I don't want you to bring them back. Even though he knows it's illegal to keep them. So that's Trump. But in this case, it's easy for Meadows to cooperate. He doesn't need an immunity deal. He doesn't need anything. In the January 6th case, he's gonna need an immunity deal because he was very, very likely involved in the plot. He certainly was in the room when they were making the plot. So that's where we're gonna find out. Is he really a cooperating witness and has turned evidence against Trump in a way that gets him immunity or not? And so this is just an appetizer for that. But remember, the documents case is easier to prove. It's an absolute, unbelievable slam dunk. I've never seen a slam dunk easier than this.
So to that point, I want to get to one other element of this investigation, which really centers on a conversation that Trump had during a closed door meeting with the ghostwriter for Mark Meadows' book, The Chief's Chief, which was published in 2021. There was also a publicist in the room for Mark Meadows. Mark Meadows was not in the room at the time. And during this meeting with Donald Trump, Trump bragged about being in possession of classified documents. Let's watch.
One of the key pieces of evidence in the case is an audio recording of Trump allegedly describing a classified document he appears to have in his possession as he was being interviewed by a writer and publisher who were at his club in Bedminster, New Jersey for Mark Meadows' book about his time as chief of staff. Meadows was not present for the interview.
This totally wins my case, you know. Except it is like highly confidential, secret. This is secret information. But look at this. This was done by the military, given to me. See, as president, I could have declassified it. Now I can't.
ABC News has reviewed an early draft of Meadows' book that describes Trump talking about the document, allegedly a 4-page war plan prepared by Joint Chiefs Chairman Mark Milley. On the couch in front of the president's desk, there's a 4-page report typed up by Mark Milley himself. It shows the general's own plan to attack Iran. The draft reads, when President Trump found this plan in his old files this morning, he pointed out that making this declassified would probably win his case.
So that very last part that you heard was an excerpt from the book that was never published in the final draft. And so Smith reached out to Mark Meadows to ask him, yo, bro, why? Like, what's going on? Why did you take that out of the book? And Mark Meadows allegedly said that, well, I didn't believe that Trump was actually in possession of the document. The reference to that document being in Trump's possession was removed before the book was published. Meadows acknowledged to investigators that he had asked that the paragraph be changed and that it would be problematic had Trump had such a document in his possession. Sources tell ABC News that Meadows told special counsel investigators that he did not discuss making those edits with Trump. But apparently, after the book was published and after this classified document story really blew up, Meadows apparently started to change his mind and realized, oh, Trump very likely was in possession of that classified document pertaining to a war plan with Iran.
Yes, and look, I'm super curious what happens when horse crap meets a courtroom. And we're gonna find out soon enough because all of Trump's excuses have been preposterous. And because of his inability to control his verbal diarrhea, where it depends on his face, he has on tape admitted that he has classified documents and that he shouldn't have them. You guys heard it with your own ears. The jury will hear it with its own ears. And then his lawyer will come in with, hey, he zapped them earlier and they were unclassified. That stuff's not gonna work in a courtroom. Look, if there's one person who's MAGA on in the jury, it's over. He's gonna skate. But if there's no, because they're just, look, we're gonna talk about the cults later, but they're among the cults in America, right? But if there's no cult member on that jury, it's open and shut, and really important stuff, guys. He didn't take home some memorabilia. I'd say get off his ass if it was that. The Kim Jong-un love letter, that's technically classified. I don't even, actually, I take that back. I don't even know if that's classified. But technically you shouldn't take that one either. It's a government document between two world leaders. But you want to take home Kim Jong-un's love letter and cuddle up with it at night. It's not the end of the world and nobody's gonna prosecute you over that. You take home nuclear secrets and our defenses and our allies' defenses, and for a guy notorious for wanting to get as much money as humanly possible at every single endeavor that he does. No, man, if there's any justice in the world, including now with Mark Meadows' testimony, he's a goner. The rest is just political. Because he has no defense, none, zero. It's gonna be a blowout inside the courtroom.
So, okay, I have a few things to say. Number one, just to your point, Cenk, I mean, remember that young man who was in the military had access to classified documents and just decided to share those classified documents or leak them in the context of a Discord channel. I bring that up because he's facing serious charges for doing so, right? For the mishandling of classified documents. So if an ordinary person who was in the military is facing serious charges and serious consequences for what he did, I think it only makes sense, given the evidence that we see, given what Trump was bragging about in that audio recording, that he faced the consequences as well. So I'm glad that this trial, or this case, I should say, is going forward. A non-substantive point that I must make. I don't know why the publisher for Mark Meadows' book hates him, because that cover ain't it. Like, I don't know what that cover was, but it's bad. He looks like he's standing behind Trump and just smelled his fart. Like what is going on there?
Well, to be fair to them, that is kind of symbolic of Mark Meadows' tenure as his chief of staff, standing behind Donald Trump and smelling his farts. And in the beginning, he pretended to enjoy them. And now facing some legal trouble of his own, all of a sudden not enjoying those farts as much. But either way, I say the book cover nailed it.
And final point I wanted to make, or it's more of a question, I'm curious what you think. So remember, when it comes to the federal case regarding Trump and his team attempting to overturn the 2020 presidential election, Mark Meadows is not indicted in that case. However, he is indicted in the Georgia case, right? And I'm wondering, let's say Fani Willis in Georgia decides, no, I'm not gonna provide any type of immunity for Mark Meadows. He's a co-conspirator, he has been indicted. Would that dissuade him from cooperating in the federal case?
Yeah, so that's why all this stuff is top secret, although then Trump might have those documents too. No, that happened after Trump. But in all seriousness, they're keeping their cards really close to the vest here in terms of Mark Meadows' role in the federal case. But if he got immunity in the federal case, that means he's going to give the evidence to the prosecutors, in which case he would do that for Fani Willis in Atlanta as well. And then at that point, basically indicting him and trying him and putting him in prison would be gratuitous. My guess is that Fani Willis and Jack Smith, the federal prosecutor, would talk, and that Meadows would probably get a similar plea deal and agreement and immunity from Georgia as he would from the federal case in that fact pattern.
Well, we'll see how it plays out, but I think this is the first sign that Meadows might be cooperating with the investigators, and that's been a rumor that's been kind of floating around for quite some time now. So interested to see how this all plays out, how this all develops. Obviously, Trump has been indicted not in just one case, but in 4 different cases. So of course, we'll update you as we learn more.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.